Some men lose everything in a single night. Silas Mercer was one of them. When the riders came with torches and rage, they left nothing but ash and absence. His house burned so bright you could see it from 3 miles out. His wife's screams cut through the smoke until they didn't. And when the sun rose over the blackened remains, Silas lay face down in the dirt with a bullet wound that should have killed him. Should have. But 5 Apache warriors stood at the edge of the ruins watching him breathe. They didn't raise their weapons. They didn't leave. They just watched as if they'd been waiting for him. The pain arrived before consciousness did. Silas felt the burn in his ribs, the copper taste of blood, the way his lungs fought for air that smelled of charred wood and destruction. His eyes opened to a sky that had no right to be so clear, so blue, so indifferent to what had happened below it. He tried to move, and his body screamed refusal. The house that had stood for 8 years was now a skeleton of beams and memory. The porch, where Eliza used to shell peas every evening, collapsed inward. The kitchen where they'd laughed over burned bread, reduced to a black scar on the earth. Everything they'd built together turned to ash in a single night of violence. Silas forced himself to his knees, then his feet. The world tilted dangerously. Blood had dried on his shirt, stiff and dark. The bullet had carved a path across his ribs close enough to kill, but somehow hadn't. His hand shook as he touched the wound, feeling the torn flesh beneath the fabric. Then he heard it, horse hooves, distant but approaching. His heart hammered against damaged ribs as he turned toward the sound, half expecting Harlan Cad's men returning to finish what they'd started. But these weren't Cad's men. 5 Apache warriors emerged from the tree on horses that moved like shadows. They sat perfectly still, watching him with eyes that revealed nothing. Silas had seen Apache before, traded with them, respected their territory, but he'd never been on the receiving end of their full attention like this. Vulnerable, alone, wounded, his hand moved instinctively toward where his rifle should have been. Gone. Everything was gone. The lead warrior, a man with a scar running from temple to jaw, urged his horse forward 3 steps, then stopped. He spoke in his own language. Words Silas couldn't understand, but the tone was clear. Not threatening, not friendly either. Something else entirely, something that felt like assessment. Silas tried to speak and managed only a rasp. He swallowed blood and tried again. My wife. They took my wife. The scarred warrior's expression didn't change, but his eyes shifted briefly to the ruins, then back to Silas. He said something to the others. One of them responded, pointing toward the distant hills where Cad's territory began. The scarred warrior dismounted. Silas tensed, ready for whatever came next. But the man simply walked to the ruins, bent down, and picked up something from the ash. When he returned, he held it out. A piece of Eliza's dress. Blue fabric, partially burned, but unmistakably hers. They took her that way, the warrior said in rough but clear English, gesturing toward the hills. Then he looked at Silas with something that might have been recognition. Harlan Cade. The name hung between them like a verdict. Silas stared at this man who somehow knew the name of his destroyer, stood in the ruins of his life, speaking it like a curse. They both understood. His mind raced through the implications, through the pain, through the impossible question forming in his throat. You know him, Silas managed. The scarred warrior's jaw tightened. We know him. And the way he said it, the weight behind those 3 words told Silas that Harlan Cade had left ruins in more places than one, that there were other fires, other losses, other reasons why. 5 Apache warriors would be watching a wounded man breathe in the ashes of his home instead of riding away. The warrior mounted his horse again. He looked down at Silas with an expression that carried something heavier than pity, something closer to kinship, born from shared destruction. You will die here if you stay, he said. Then he turned his horse toward the tree inn. Silas took one step forward, his body screaming protest. Wait. The warrior didn't turn around, but he stopped. I need to find her, Silas said, each word costing him. I need to find my wife, and I need to make him pay for what he did. The warrior remained motionless for a long moment. Then, without looking back, he spoke. Words that would change everything. Then you need to come with us. Following 5 Apache warriors into their territory felt like walking toward his own execution. Silas rode behind them on a horse they'd given him, each step taking him deeper in a land where white men didn't return from. His ribs screamed with every movement, the wound leaking. Fresh blood through the makeshift bandage one of the warriors had tied without speaking. They moved in silence, through canyons that seemed to swallow sound itself. The scarred warrior never looked back. None of them did. They rode, as if Silas wasn't there. Yet he knew they tracked his every breath. One wrong move, and mercy would turn to violence. Hours passed until the sun descended, painting the canyon walls in shades of copper and blood. Just when Silas thought he might fall from the saddle, the lead warrior raised his hand. They stopped. The camp materialized from the landscape, hidden in a box canyon with water and shelter. More warriors emerged from positions Silas hadn't noticed. Women and children watched from a distance, their faces carefully neutral. An older man stepped forward, carrying himself with the bearing of someone others deferred to without question. His hair showed gray at the temples, and his eyes held the weight of too many losses. He studied Silas with intensity that felt like being dissected. I am now well. You are Silas Mercer, the man whose land borders the river where 3 of our women were gathering medicine 6 moons ago. Silas's mind raced. 6 months back, rumors of violence near the river. Cads. Men spreading stories about Apache aggression. Harlan Cad's men found them there. Now well continued, controlled rage. Threading through his voice. They did things that cannot be spoken. Then they burned our medicine stores and blamed us for stealing cattle that never existed. When we sought justice, more of Cad's men came. They ended 2 of our young warriors and took one of our own. The words hit Silas like physical blows. Eliza's screams echoing in his memory suddenly found harmony with other screams, other violence, other ruins created by the same hands. Your land was always safe passage, now well said. You traded fairly. Cade wanted your land because it gives him control of the water source. He wanted our silence because we knew what he was, so he destroyed both. The attack wasn't random. Violence. It was calculated elimination. You were watching my house, Silas. Realized. We watched all of Cad's movements. We saw the riders come. We heard your wife scream. And we waited to see if he would survive. Why didn't you help? If we had intervened, Cade would have brought the army. He would have claimed we attacked settlers. More of our people would perish. So, we watched and we waited to see what kind of man would survive. Now Wells stepped closer. Harlan Cade has built his empire on our suffering and yours. He has the protection of men in power. We cannot touch him without bringing destruction on our people. But you, he let the word hang between them. You think I could do what you can't. I think we can do together what neither can do alone. But first, you must become more than what you were. Learn our ways, speak our language, understand our cause. Transform your grief into purpose. Silas thought of Eliza of the blue fabric inn. The ash. How long would that take? As long as it takes days, weeks, months. Your wife is alive. Cade keeps his prizes, but she will not be the same woman you remember. And each day costs her more. The choice crystallized before him. Rush after Eliza and perish. Uselessly or transform into something capable of actually saving her. Teach me, Silas said, and turned to the gathered warriors and spoke in their language. They exchanged looks ranging from skepticism to outright hostility. One warrior stepped forward, younger but powerfully built, and spoke with clear anger. He looked at Silas with undisguised contempt. Takakota believes you will fail. Now translated that white. Men cannot be trusted. That teaching you our ways will bring only betrayal. If you survive 3 days of training, he will consider you might be worth keeping alive. The way Takakota smiled made it clear he didn't expect Silas to survive. Even one. Behind Well, a young woman emerged carrying water. She moved, carefully as if her body remembered pain. When she saw Silas looking, she met his eyes for just a moment before turning away. In that brief glance, Silas saw something that made his blood run cold. The same emptiness that must have been in Eliza's eyes. This was one of the women from the river, one of the survivors. Suddenly, Silas understood. They needed someone who could move through Cad's world without raising alarm. Someone who could get close, enough to strike where they couldn't. They needed a weapon that looked like a white man. Now Well watched these thoughts cross Silas's face. You understand now? Yes. Good. Na gestured to Takakota. He will begin your education at dawn. Silas was led to a shelter at the edge of the camp. Isolated, observed, not quite. Prisoner, not quite guessed. He lay down, his body finally acknowledging its damage. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind circled back to Nowell's words. Each day costs her more, and somewhere in the darkness, Takakota sharpened his blade with slow, deliberate strokes that sounded like promises of pain. Dawn broke cold and merciless. Silas woke to find Takakota standing over him, expression carved from stone. The young warrior said nothing, just gestured for Silas to follow. Every muscle in Silas's body protested as he stood. The wound in his ribs a constant reminder of how close to broken he remained. They walked to a clearing where other warriors had gathered, watching with crossed arms and skeptical eyes. Takakota picked up 2 long staffs, tossed one to Silas. It hit the ground before Silas could react. Takakota said something in his language that made the others laugh. Silas didn't need translation. The message was clear. Prove yourself or perish. Trying. The first strike came before Silas had fully gripped the staff. Takakota's weapon cracked across his shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second blow caught his leg, dropping him to one knee. The third would have crushed his skull if Silas hadn't rolled at the last instant. Pain exploded through his ribs. Blood seeped through his bandage. Takakota circled him like a predator that enjoyed playing with wounded prey. Silas forced himself upright, staff raised in defense. Takakota attacked again, faster this time, and Silas managed to block one strike before the second knocked the weapon from his hands. He landed hard on his back, staring up at the sky, tasting blood. Takakota stood over him, staff positioned at his throat. He said something that sounded like a question. He asked if you're finished. Now Wells. Voice came from the edge of the clearing. If you want to quit and go after your wife alone. If you want to, choose certain failure over difficult transformation. Silas's entire body screamed for rest. His vision swam. Every breath felt like being stabbed. The logical part of his mind calculated the impossibility of what they asked. He was wounded, exhausted, outmatched in every way. But then he thought of Eliza, of each day that passed while he lay in the dirt, of Harlan Cade's hands on her, of the woman by the river with empty eyes. He grabbed the staff and pushed himself up. Takakota's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. Respect or surprise, Silas couldn't tell. The young warrior attacked again, and this time, Silas lasted 5 seconds before being disarmed. Then 10, then 20. By midday, Silas couldn't stand without swaying. His hands bled where the staff had torn skin. His ribs felt like broken glass, grinding together, but he kept getting up. By afternoon, he began to see patterns in Takakota's attacks. Not enough to counter them, but enough to anticipate, to position himself slightly better, to make the other warrior work. Marginally harder for each strike. As the sun descended, something changed. Takakota's attacks became teaching, rather than punishment. He would strike, then pause, showing Silas where his defense had failed. The other warriors began calling out instructions in their language. And though Silas couldn't understand the words, he understood the intent. They were actually teaching him. When Takakota finally lowered his staff, the young warrior's face still showed no emotion, but he nodded once. A tiny gesture that meant everything. Now well, approached. You survived day one. Barely. Tomorrow will be harder. What? Changed? Silas asked through split lips. Why did he stop trying to end me? Because you didn't quit when you should have. Because you understand that transformation requires suffering. Because Nawel paused, choosing his words carefully. Because Takakota lost his brother to Cad's men 3 moons ago. He wanted to see if you had the same fire for revenge that burns in him. And do I? We'll see. Na gestured toward the camp. Come, you need food and rest. Tomorrow, Takakota teaches you our language. The next day, our ways of moving unseen. The day after, how to read tracks and terrain. You have much to learn. How long before I'm ready? Na's expression darkened. That depends on how fast you can become someone else entirely. Cad's compound is heavily protected. His men number in the dozens. Walking through that gate requires more than strength or rage. It requires strategy, patience, and the ability to look like you belong there. You sent people before. Silas realized. That's how you know so much about his compound. The silence that followed confirmed everything. They didn't come back, Silas said. No. Nawel's voice carried the weight of those losses. They were warriors trained from birth, and still they failed. Cad's paranoia runs deep. He trusts no one, allows no strangers near unless he let the word hang. Unless, what? Unless they bring him something he wants, something valuable enough to lower his guard. Understanding crashed. Over Silas like cold water. You're going to use me as bait. We're going to use you as an opportunity, and well corrected. When you're ready, you'll approach Cad's compound with a story he'll believe. A reason for him to let you inside those walls. And once you're there, I find Eliza and end him. If you're strong enough, smart enough, if you can control your rage long enough to see the opening. Revenge rushed is revenge. Failed. We've learned this lesson in blood. Night fell over the camp. Silas lay in his shelter, body screaming, mind racing. Tomorrow would bring new pain, new lessons, new steps toward becoming. Something other than the man whose house had burned. But one thought kept circling back, refusing to be silenced. Now it said Cade keeps his prizes. Had said Eliza was alive, but changing with each day. What if by the time Silas was ready, there was nothing left of her to save? What if transformation took so long that he rescued a stranger wearing his wife's face? And in the darkness, Takakota began sharpening his blade again. The rhythmic sound a countdown to tomorrow's suffering. Weeks dissolved into each other like water into sand. Silas stopped counting days and started measuring time and bruises earned. Words learned, skills acquired. His body, transformed through relentless training. The softness of his former life burned away by necessity. The wound in his ribs healed into an angry scar that pulled with every movement. A permanent reminder of the night his world ended. Takakota proved to be a merciless teacher, but fair in his cruelty. Each morning brought new lessons delivered. Through pain and repetition, hand-to-hand combat, knife work, how to move through terrain without leaving. Traces, how to read the land for water, shelter, danger. The Apache language came slowly at first, then faster as Silas's mind rewired itself around the new sounds and meanings. But the hardest lessons weren't physical. One afternoon, Nawel brought him to a ridge overlooking Cad's compound in the distance. Through the shimmering heat, Silas could make out the sprawling buildings, the high walls, the guards, positioned at regular intervals. "Tell me what you see," Nawel instructed in Apache. They spoke only in the native tongue, now forcing Silas to think in their language. "Walls, guards, no clear entry point," Silas responded, the words still clumsy on his tongue. "You see with the eyes of a man planning to attack." "Wrong. You need to see with the eyes of someone who belongs there." Not pointed to the main gate. Cade receives merchants, traders, men seeking work. He needs the world to see him as legitimate, powerful, generous even. So he allows certain people through those gates. The question is, which kind of person are you? Understanding began to crystallize. Not a victim seeking revenge. No, a man with something Cade wants. A man who poses no threat because he comes seeking opportunity, not justice. What does Cade want that would make him lower his guard? Nawel's expression darkened. Information. Cade built his empire through knowing things others don't, through learning secrets and using them as weapons. If you approached him as a man with valuable knowledge about Apache movements, about our numbers, our plans, the implications, turned Silas's stomach. "You want me to pretend to betray you? We want you to become someone Cade would believe. A desperate man who lost everything and blames us for not helping. A man bitter enough to sell information for golden safety. He'll never believe it. He will, because it's the truth with one detail. Changed. You're desperate. You did lose everything, and we did stand by and watch." Nawel met his eyes. "The only lie is which side you're truly on, and Cad's arrogance will blind him to that possibility. Men like him can't imagine someone enduring what you've endured for any reason except self-preservation." A new voice cut through the conversation. Unless someone warns him first. They turned to find a young warrior approaching. Someone Silas recognized from training, but had never spoken with directly. His expression carried trouble. Kalai Nawel acknowledged. "Speak." "There's word from the trading post." One of Cad's men was asking questions about Apache movements, specifically asking if anyone had seen a white man traveling with our people. Clee's eyes flicked to Silas, described him, his clothes, even mentioned his injured ribs. The air seemed to freeze. "How?" Silas demanded. "Cade has scouts, informants, people who watch and report." Nawel's jaw tightened. "We knew this was a risk, but I hoped we'd have more time." "What does this mean?" Silas asked, though part of him already knew. "It means Cade knows you're alive, which means he knows you didn't die in the fire as intended, which means Nahil's paws carried the weight of collapse plans. He'll be watching for you, suspicious of any approach you make. Then the plan fails before it begins." "Not necessarily." "Nah." Turned back toward the compound, his mind clearly working through new calculations. "Cade, knowing you're alive, changes the game but doesn't end it. In fact, it might give us a different opportunity." "What opportunity?" "If he knows you survived and are with us, he'll assume you're planning revenge. He'll expect you to try something foolish, desperate, an attack, an ambush. What he won't expect is for you to walk through his front gate in broad daylight." Silas stared at him. "That's insane." "Exactly. Too insane to be a trap. Too bold to be a revenge plan." Noel's eyes gleamed with a dangerous idea taking shape. "You approach openly, unarmed, requesting an audience. You tell him the truth, that you survived, that the Apache found you, that you learned what he did to them, and then you make him an offer." "What offer?" "That you'll help him eliminate the Apache threat. That your time with us taught you their weaknesses, their numbers, their plans. That you want revenge on them for not saving your wife when they could have." The layers of deception made Silas's head spin. "And when I'm inside, you find Eliza. You learn the layout. You identify his vulnerabilities. And when the moment comes, Nawel didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Kay spoke again, his voice carrying skepticism. This plan requires him to be perfect. One wrong word, one suspicious gesture, and Cade will see through it. Then he dies, and we lose our only chance, which is why his training isn't finished. Takakota's voice came from behind them. The young warrior had approached without sound, a skill he'd been trying to teach Silas for weeks. He's learned our language, our fighting, our tracking, but he hasn't learned the most important lesson. What lesson? Silas asked. Takakota stepped closer, his expression harder than usual. How to lie so well you believe it yourself. How to look a man in the eye and tell him exactly what he wants to hear while planning his destruction. How to become someone else entirely, even when everything in you screams the truth. I can do that. Can you? Takakota challenged. Because the moment you see your wife, every instinct will tell you to grab her and run. Every fiber of your being will want to end Cade the second. You're close enough. And if you give in to those instincts, even for a heartbeat, you'll both die. And everyone who suffered because of him will never see justice. The truth of it settled over Silas like a weight. This wasn't just about being strong enough or skilled enough. It was about being disciplined enough to watch Eliza suffer and do nothing, to stand in the same room as the man who destroyed his life and smile, to become the kind of person who could sacrifice everything, including his own desperate need for immediate action, for the possibility of actual success. How do I learn that? Silas asked quietly. Nawel and Takakota exchanged a look that communicated something Silas couldn't quite read. We teach you the way we taught our scouts. Who went into Cad's compound before, Newell said. The ones who didn't return. And you think I'll succeed where they failed? No, Takakota said bluntly. But you have something they didn't. Something that might make Cade drop his guard just enough. What's that? Grief. Real, visible bone, deep grief that can't be faked because it's true. Cade will look for deception in your eyes. Instead, he'll see a broken man, desperate for purpose. And broken, desperate men are easy to manipulate. He'll think he's using you. While I'm using him, Silas finished. If you survive long enough, Takakota's hand rested on his knife, and that is far from certain. Nawel gestured back toward camp. We have 3 more weeks. Before you're ready, 3 weeks to teach you how to be the kind of traitor Cade will believe. 3 weeks before you walk into his compound and risk everything. 3 weeks before Silas would stand face with Heron Cade. 3 weeks before he'd see Eliza again or learn there was nothing left of her to save. 3 weeks to prepare for a performance where one mistake meant death. As they walked back toward camp, Kay fell on his step beside Silas and spoke quietly. There's something else you should know about the scouts we sent before about why they failed. What? Kayla's expression carried the shadow of something he didn't want to say. They didn't just fail to complete the mission. They disappeared completely. No bodies recovered. No were their fate. It's like Cade made them vanish from existence. Meaning what? Meaning whatever he does to people who betray him or attempt infiltration. It's worse than death, and you're about to volunteer for it. The words followed Silas back to his shelter, wrapped around him in the darkness, and waited in his dreams, where Eliza's screams mixed with the screams of people he'd never met who'd tried this same impossible thing before him. And in exactly 3 weeks, he would follow in their footsteps, walking willingly into whatever horror had consumed them. If Nawel's plan worked, he'd rescue Eliza and end Cad's reign of cruelty. If it failed, he'd simply become another person who vanished into the compounds. Darkness, leaving no trace behind except the memory of someone foolish enough to believe he could succeed where others hadn't. The final 3 weeks passed like water through cupped hands. Too fast and too slow simultaneously. Silas's transformation completed in ways that went beyond physical capability. He could move like shadow, speak like native, fight with efficiency born from repetition. But the hardest skill came last, learning to bury truth beneath layers of convincing deception. Now made him practice his story until it flowed without hesitation. The bitterness had to feel real because parts of it were real. The anger toward the Apache for watching his house burn had to ring. Authentic because somewhere deep inside that anger existed even though he understood their reasoning. 2 days before his planned approach to Cad's compound, the woman from the river came to his shelter. She stood at the entrance, silent, her eyes carrying the weight of someone deciding whether to speak or retreat. Silas recognized her. Immediately, the careful way she moved, the shadows that lived behind her expression. You're going into his compound, she said quietly. Not a question. Yes. Then you should know what you'll find there. She stepped inside, her hands trembling slightly. I was inside those walls for 2 weeks before. Nowell's warriors rescued me. 2 weeks that felt like years. Silas's throat tightened. You don't have to. You need to hear this. You need to know what your wife has endured, what she's still enduring. The woman's voice carried steel beneath the pain. Cade keeps his prizes in the east wing of the main house. Private rooms that no one enters except him. The guards don't go there. The servants don't clean there. Whatever happens in those rooms, only he and his victims know how many. Silas forced himself to ask. When I was there, 3 others women taken from travelers from settlements from us. He keeps them like possessions, like things he owns that no one else can touch. The rage building in Silas's chest threatened to consume him, but he forced it down. This was exactly the reaction Takakota had warned him about. The instinct to charge in blindly, to let fury override strategy. Your wife, the woman continued, her voice softer now. If she's strong like I think she is, she'll have found ways to survive, ways to make herself useful. Enough to keep alive, but not valuable enough to keep locked away every moment. Some women cook for him. Some manage his household. It's the only way to keep some piece of yourself intact. Did you see her? A woman with dark hair about. This tall. I saw many women, but there was one who'd been there longer than the others. The one Cade called his first treasure. She ran the household, spoke to visitors, presented the face of civility while hiding what really happened in that place. The woman paused. She had dark hair and eyes that still fought even when everything else had surrendered. Silas's heart hammered. That could be her. If it is, you need to understand something crucial. She won't be the same. The woman you remembered died the night he took her. What remains is someone who learned to survive in ways that change you forever. When you see her, you can't react like a husband, recognizing his wife. You have to react like a stranger seeing a servant. I don't know if I can do that. Then you'll fail, and you'll doom her to whatever time she has left in that place. The woman's hand touched his arm briefly. I'm telling you this because Nahul won't, because he needs you focused on the mission, not the person. But you need to know both the strategic truth and the human one. She turned to leave, then paused. There's something else. Cade talks to his prizes, tells them things he'd never tell his men. Plans, weaknesses, fears. He does it because he believes they're too broken to use the information. But your wife, if she survived this long, she's been listening. She knows things that could destroy him. So, I need to make contact with her somehow. You need to make her understand you're there, but you can't approach her directly. Cade watches everything in that compound. If he sees any connection between you and her, he'll know it's a trap. The woman's expression turned grim. Our warriors who went before Cade discovered their true purpose. What he did to them. She stopped, unable or unwilling to finish. What did he do? He made examples. Public. One slow ones. Examples meant to send a message to anyone else who might think to cross him. Her voice barely rose, above a whisper. If he suspects you for even a moment, that's your fate and hers. After she left, Silas sat in the growing darkness, processing everything he'd learned. The mission had always been dangerous, but now it carried layers of complexity he hadn't fully grasped. Finding Eliza wasn't enough. He had to find her, communicate with her, coordinate with her, and extract information from her, all while maintaining the appearance of a traitor. Seeking Cad's favor. One wrong look, one moment of recognition, one slip in the performance, and they'd both suffer fates worse than the death that should have claimed him in the fire. Now appeared at his shelter as night fell completely. Kale returned from the trading post. He has news. The way he said it made Silas's stomach drop. What news? Cad's men were there again, still, asking about you, but this time they offered gold for information. Substantial gold. Someone in the camp might be tempted by that kind of money. You think someone would betray us? I think desperation makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise consider. And Cade knows how to exploit desperation. Now Wells' jaw tightened. We need to move. Faster than planned. You go tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm not ready. You're as ready as you'll ever be. And every day we wait is another day for someone to sell your location. Another day for Cade to prepare defenses. Another day your wife suffers. Naha leaned closer. Tomorrow at dawn, you ride for his compound. You arrive by midday. You request an audience. And then everything we've built either succeeds or fails. The weight of it pressed down on Silas like physical force. Tomorrow, not 3 days. From now, with more preparation tomorrow. What if I fail? Then 500 warriors ride on that compound anyway, and we all die trying to burn it to the ground. Your way gives us a chance at success with minimal loss. The direct assault guarantees massive casualties on both sides. Na's expression softened slightly, but it also means if you die, you won't die alone. We're committed to this to you, to ending Cad's reign, regardless of cost. After Noel left, Silas tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind circled through everything he'd learned, every skill he'd acquired, every word of his cover story. He thought of Eliza transformed into someone who ran Cad's household while surviving horrors he could barely imagine. Would she recognize him? Would she understand he was there to save her? Would she even want to be saved after so long in that place? And somewhere across the distance, in a compound built on suffering and control, Harlan Cade prepared for bed, not knowing that tomorrow, the man whose life he destroyed would walk through his gates, not knowing that his first treasure, the woman with dark hair and fighting eyes, had been waiting for exactly this opportunity, not knowing that his empire of cruelty stood one day away from its reckoning. But only if Silas could pull off the performance of his life. Only if he could look the man who took everything from him in the eye and smile. Only if he could watch Eliza suffer and do nothing until the perfect moment revealed itself. Tomorrow would prove whether he'd truly transformed from a man of peace into a weapon capable of destroying monsters. Tomorrow, everything changed. Or tomorrow, everything ended. The ride to Cad's compound felt like riding toward his own. Gadabe. Silas kept his posture relaxed, his expression carefully neutral. Every gesture calculated to communicate a man seeking opportunity rather than revenge. The high walls appeared on the horizon. First, then the guard towers, then the compound itself, sprawling like a fortress built from stolen prosperity. 3 guards stopped him at the gate, rifles raised. Their eyes assessed him with the practiced suspicion of men who'd turn away hundreds and ended dozens. State your business, the lead guard commanded. I need to speak with Harland. Cade. Silas kept his voice steady, empty of threat. Tell him Silas Mercer is here. He'll know the name. The guards exchanged glances. One disappeared inside, while the others kept there. Weapons trained on him. Minutes stretched like hours. Silas's heart hammered against his ribs, but his face showed only patient waiting. When the guard returned, his expression had shifted to something closer to curiosity. Hell see you, but you're searched first thoroughly. They stripped him of everything except his clothes, checked every seam, every pocket, ran hands over every inch looking for concealed weapons. Found nothing because Silas carried nothing. His only weapons were words and timing. The compounds. Interior revealed wealth built on suffering, fine furnishings, expensive rugs, paintings that had no business being in this remote territory, and servants moving through it all with eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze. Then he saw her. Eliza emerged from a doorway, carrying linens, her dark hair pulled back, her movements efficient and practiced. She wore a plain dress that had once been quality fabric, now faded from washing. Her face showed the careful blankness of someone who'd learned to disappear while remaining visible. Their eyes met for half a heartbeat. Recognition flashed in hers, shock, disbelief, desperate hope before. Her expression returned to neutral servitude. She continued walking as if he meant nothing, but her hands trembled, slightly against the linens. That glimpse told Silas everything. She was alive. She was aware, and she understood immediately that he couldn't acknowledge her. Silas Mercer. The voice came from the top of the staircase. Harlan K. descended like a man who owned not just this building, but the very air inside. It, tall, well-dressed, handsome in the way poisonous things could be beautiful. His smile carried warmth that never reached his cold eyes. I have to admit, I'm surprised to see you breathing, Cade said conversationally. My men were certain they'd finish the job. Every instinct screamed at Silas to attack, to wrap his hand around this man's throat and squeeze until life left his body. But he trained for exactly this moment. He let grief show on his face instead of rage, defeat instead of determination. They almost did. Silas touched his ribs where the scars still pulled. Left me for dead. Would have died too if the Apache hadn't found me. Cad's expression sharpened with interest. The Apache? How fascinating. Do tell me more. This was the critical moment. Sell the lie or die trying. They patched me up, kept me alive, and I spent weeks in their camp learning their language, their ways. Silas let bitterness color his voice, learning that they watched my house burn and did nothing. But they could have saved my wife but chose not to. And why would they keep you alive? Cade asked, descending the final steps. The Apache aren't known for their hospitality to white men, because I have something they want. Information about your operation, your defenses, your plans. Silas met Cade's eyes directly. They thought they could use me against you. Could they? No. Silas let the word hang. Because, while I was there, I realized something. You took my wife. You destroyed my home. But they watched it happen. They let her scream and did nothing. So, I made them believe I'd help them. Learned everything I could about their numbers and strategies and came here instead. Cade studied him with the intensity of a predator deciding whether something was prey or threat. You're saying you want to betray the Apache to me. I'm saying I want to survive and I want to find my wife. Silas's voice cracked slightly on the last words. Not performed, but genuine. They told me you keep women here, that you collect them. If Eliza is alive, if she's here, I need to know. And in exchange for this information about Apache movements and numbers, you expect me to what? Return your wife? I expect nothing except the chance to see her again, to know she's alive. Whatever arrangement you want after that, we can discuss. Silas forced himself to add, I'm a practical man, Mr. Cade. I've lost everything. I need a new purpose, a new place in this territory. You clearly have power. The Apache clearly don't care about justice. So, I'm choosing the side that can actually give me something. The words tasted like poison, but they flowed smoothly. This was the man Cade needed to see. Broken, desperate, morally flexible. Cade, circle them slowly, considering you understand that if you're lying, if this is some elaborate Apache plot, I'll make. Your death last week's. I've perfected certain techniques for extracting truth and prolonging suffering. I understand. And you're willing to provide detailed information about Apache positions, numbers, plan movements, everything I learned. Kate smiled. Then welcome to my home, Silas Mercer. We have much to discuss. He gestured to a guard. Show him to the guest quarters. Give him food and water. We'll talk more this evening. As Silas was led away, he caught one more glimpse of Eliza in a doorway. This time, her expression carried something new, a tiny spark that might have been hope or might have been warning. He was inside, the first, impossible step complete. But as they walked him deeper into the compound, past doors he couldn't see behind, and corridors that twisted like a maze, Silas realized the truth. Getting in was never the hard part. Getting out alive would be. 3 days inside Cad's compound taught Silas the layout, the routines, the vulnerabilities. He fed Cade carefully constructed lies about Apache positions while actually mapping every guard post, every weapon cache, every exit. Eliza moved through the house like a ghost, and twice they'd managed brief moments alone where she whispered critical information. The east wall had a structural weakness. Cade kept his personal arsenal in the cellar. The guards changed shifts at dawn, but the most important thing she told him was this. He plans to strike the Apache. Camp in 4 days. A full assault. He's been gathering men and weapons for weeks, which meant Nowell's timeline was even tighter than they'd realized. On the third night, Silas stood in Cad's study, providing more false information. When the first alarm sounded, a guard burst through the door, face pale with panic. Sir, we have a situation. The lookout spotted movement on all sides. A lot of movement. Cad's expression hardened. He turned to Silas with dawning suspicion. What did you do? What you were about to do to them, Silas said quietly, dropping the pretense. Entirely. Except we got here first. Cad's hand moved toward his pistol, but Silas was faster. The knife he'd taken from the kitchen 2 days ago appeared in his hand, pressed against Cad's throat. Before the gun cleared its holster. Call your men to the yard, Silas commanded. All of them. Now you're a dead man. We're all dead men eventually. The question is who dies today. Silas pressed the blade harder. Call them now. Cad's jaw clenched, but he nodded to the guard. Gather everyone in the main yard. Full assembly. As the compound erupted into confused activity, Silas kept the knife steady. Eliza appeared in the doorway with 2 other women, all holding improvised weapons. She met Silas's eyes with an expression that held steel beneath the fear. Get the others, Silas told her. Every woman. He's kept here. Arm them with whatever you can find. When this is over, you all walk out free. The yard filled with Cad's men, maybe 40 in total, heavily armed and confused, they surrounded Silas and their employer, uncertain whether to shoot or wait for orders. Then the gates opened, not forced, not broken, opened from within by the 2 guards Nahul had managed to turn weeks ago with promises of gold and safe passage. Through those gates rode Nahul at the head of 500 Apache warriors. They poured into the compound like a flood, surrounding the buildings, the walls, every possible escape route. The sun set, painted them in shades of red and gold, transforming them into something out of myth. Cad's men raised their weapons, but the numbers made resistance clearly futile. Nowell rode forward until he sat 20 feet from where Silas held Cade. His expression carried the weight of too many losses, finally finding their reckoning. Harlan Cade, Nowell said in clear English that carried across the silent yard. For the burning of our medicine stores, for the harm done to our women, for the ending of our warriors, for the theft of our land, and the suffering of our people. You will answer. You're making a mistake, Cade said, voice steady. Despite the knife at his throat, the army will come. You'll bring war to your entire tribe. The army will come and find you already gone, Nawel responded. And they will find evidence that you were trading weapons to hostile tribes, that you were planning to stage attacks on settlements, to justify taking more land. Evidence we've been gathering for months. Evidence that will make you look like the threat, not us. Silas felt Cad's body tense as the full scope of the plan revealed itself. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about dismantling everything Cade had built, destroying his reputation, removing him from power in ways that wouldn't bring retaliation on the Apache. Your men have a choice. Nawel continued, addressing the gathered guards. Lay down your weapons and leave with your lives and enough. Go to start somewhere else. Or stand with a man whose crimes are about to become public knowledge and share his fate. For a long moment, no one moved. Then one guard dropped his rifle, then another, then a dozen more. Within minutes, only a handful remained standing with weapons raised. The true believers, the ones too deep in Cad's brutality to imagine another path. Silas, Cade said quietly, voice carrying an edge of desperation. Whatever they promised you, I can double it, triple it. Name your price. My price, Silas said, was a house that didn't burn, a wife who didn't scream, a life that you took for nothing more than land and water. He pulled Cade toward where Eliza stood. Look at her. Look at what you did. And tell me what price could possibly balance that scale. Cade looked at Eliza, and for the first time, something like fear crossed his face. Not fear of death, but fear of facing the consequences of his choices, of being held accountable by the people he'd considered beneath accountability. I did what men with power do, Cade said. I took what I wanted. That's how the world works. No, Silas respondeth. That's how your world worked. Past tense. Takakota dismounted and approached with several warriors. They bound Cad's hands despite his struggles. The remaining loyal guards found themselves similarly surrounded and disarmed. But as the Apaches secured the compound, a new sound cut through the settling dust. Hoof beats. Multiple riders approaching fast from the main road. A scout rushed to Nawel, speaking rapidly in their language. Nawel's expression darkened. What is it? Silas demanded. Army patrol, Nawel said, grimly. 20 soldiers. They'll be here in minutes. The triumph of the moment evaporated. They had secured the compound and captured Cade. But if the army arrived and found Apache warriors in force, it could spark exactly the kind of conflict they tried to avoid. We need to leave, Takakota urged now. But Eliza stepped forward, her voice carrying authority built from years of surviving in this place. No, if you run, it confirms aggression. But if we present this correctly, if we control the narrative, she looked at Silas with an expression that communicated a plan forming. A desperate, dangerous plan that might be their only chance. I know. The patrol captain, she said. He's been here before, and there are things about Cade he doesn't know. Things that would turn an ally into an accuser. The hoof beats grew louder, closer. How long do we have? Silas asked. 2 minutes. Nawel estimated. Maybe less. Then we have 2 minutes to save this, Eliza said. Or we all die. Trying. The army patrol rode through the gates to find a scene that defied simple explanation. 00 Apache Warriors. Surrounding the compound. Harlan Cade bound and bleeding, his men disarmed, and women emerging from the main house, carrying evidence of their captivity. Captain Morrison dismounted slowly, hand on his pistol, eyes scanning the situation for threats. He knew Cade had shared meals at this very compound, but the scene before him challenged everything he believed about the man. Eliza stepped forward before anyone could speak. Captain Morrison, you came to my wedding 3 years ago. You said if I ever needed help, I should ask. Morrison's expression shifted from confusion to recognition. Mrs. Mercer, we thought you were gone. Cade said there was an Apache raid. There was no raid. Eliza's voice carried across the silent yard. Cad's men destroyed our home. Took me, and I've been held here for months along with 7 other women. She gestured to the others standing behind her. Some for even longer. That's a lie. Cade snarled. She's confused. The Apache have poisoned her mind. The Apache saved my husband's life after your men left him to die. Eliza cut him off. And while I've been here, I've kept records, names, dates, transactions. She produced a leather journal from beneath her dress. Every weapon deal, every bribe, every plan to stage attacks on settlements, and blamed the Apache to justify taking their land. It's all here in your handwriting. Morrison took the journal, flipping through pages that detailed years of criminal activity. His face darkened with each revelation. Where did you get this? He kept it in his study. Thought I was too broken to read or understand. Thought all of us were. Eliza's voice steadied. But we remembered everything and we wrote it down when he wasn't watching. Cade lunged toward her, but Takakota's grip held firm. You traitoress. No. Nahil interrupted, stepping forward. She is the opposite of traitor. She is survivor. She is witness. And now she is free. Morrison looked between Cade, the journal, the gathered women, and the Apache Warriors. The political calculation played across his face. This could spark war, or it could expose corruption that reached into his own ranks. Captain, Silas said carefully, we're not here to start a conflict. We're here to end one. Cade built his empire on suffering, ours and theirs. We've removed that empire. What happens? To him now is your jurisdiction, not ours. The genius of it settled over the yard. The Apache hadn't executed Cade, hadn't declared war. They'd simply stopped him and handed the evidence to proper authority. It removed any justification for retaliation. Morrison called to his men. Secure the prisoner. We're taking him back to the fort to face charges. He looked at Nowell. And your people will return to our land. Nowell responded with the understanding that this man's crimes do not represent all settlers. That peace serves both our peoples better than continued conflict. And the women go free, Eliza said firmly, with compensation from Cad's assets for what was taken from us, and safe passage to wherever we choose to go. Morrison nodded slowly. I'll see that arranged. He gestured to his soldiers, who moved to take custody of Cade. As they dragged him toward the horses, Cad's eyes found Silas one last time. You think this ends anything? There are others like me. There will always be others. Maybe, Silas said quietly, but you won't be one of them anymore. Cade was lifted onto a horse, bound and guarded. The patrol prepared to leave with their prisoner and the evidence that would ensure he never walked free again. The charges will be extensive, the trial public, the sentence permanent. As the soldiers departed, the Apache Warriors began their own withdrawal. Nowell approached Silas and extended his hand in the white man's custom. You kept your word became what needed to become, survive what others couldn't. We kept our word, Silas corrected, grasping his hand firmly. All of us together, the land that was yours, Nowell continued. The water source, it will be respected boundary. Your people, our people, we can trade, talk live, without destroying each other. Takakota stepped forward, and for the first time, something resembling respect showed in his expression. He said something in Apache that made Nowell smile slightly. He says you are not weak, that you earned the right to rebuild, and that if you need help, he will come. As the last Apache warrior rode through the gates, the compound fell silent except for the sound of women gathering their few possessions, preparing to leave this place of suffering behind. Silas found Eliza standing in what had been Cad's study, watching papers burn in the fireplace. She'd changed from a servant's dress into clothes taken from Cad's own collection, reclaiming her dignity one choice at a time. "What now?" she asked without turning. "We rebuild. Different than before, but still ours." Silas moved beside her. "The land is still there, the water. We can start again." "I'm not the same person who lived there," Eliza said quietly. "What he did, what I survived, it changed me in ways I'm still discovering. I'm not the same either. The man who lived there died in that fire." Silas took her hand carefully, giving her the choice to accept or withdraw. "But maybe who we are now can build something stronger than what we were." Eliza's fingers tightened around his. "Different, but ours. Different, but ours." They walked out of the compound together as the sun set behind them. Behind them, other women departed in different directions, carrying gold and freedom and the fierce pride of having survived what should have broken them. Ahead lay the land that had always been home, now guaranteed safe by alliance instead of isolation. The house would need rebuilding, the fields replanting, the life they'd known was ash and memory. But from ash came growth. From memory came wisdom. And from the impossible alliance between a man who'd lost everything and warriors who'd suffered too much came something new. A fragile peace built on mutual respect, instead of violence. Silas Mercer had ridden into Harlan Cad's compound alone, pretending to be a traitor. He rode away with his wife, having transformed into something he'd never imagined, a bridge between worlds that had been at war, and a man who'd learned that sometimes the strongest weapon isn't violence, but the courage to survive long enough to see justice done right. The house that would rise on their land wouldn't be the same as before. It would be better because they would build it as people who understood what it meant to lose everything, survive impossible odds, and choose hope over hatred. And in the distance, 500 Apache warriors rode home, knowing that not all white men were enemies, that some could be trusted, that some were worth saving. The old world had burned, the new one waited to be built, and this time they would build it together. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the untamed West, where courage and destiny collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything too.